Like a Jet live, brought to you by U Stadium. I'm Luke. As always, we have Clay, and we have a very special this today. Dennis, how you going?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, guys. How you guys doing?
Not too bad. Would be doing a little better if the offense wasn't sputtering, but we'll touch on that in just a moment. Just wanted to say to everyone that watches the show and all our programs with U Stadium, if you really do enjoy it, make sure you can donate a small amount, support the work that Clay, myself, Nick, and all the team are doing with U Stadium. So feel free to do that. Lots of great content coming up throughout the preseason. Without any further ado, though, Dennis, we wanted to start touching on the green and white scrimmage that happened a few days ago. And it sounded like the defense got the better of the day. The offense did really struggle, may have even been their worst practice of the day. Start off by telling us a little bit about Zach Wilson and how he struggled a little bit in that live scrimmage.
Yeah, I think the key thing was after the scrimmage, he said, when asked to assess his performance, he said, "Yeah, not great." And I think he has a clear understanding of the expectations right now that people expect him to really take off at this point, and start to show some real progress. And at this point, you're seeing a lot of up and down, and that was what the case was that day, that night at MetLife Stadium. And the offense is struggling right now. The defense is ahead, and Robert Saleh has said that. Most training camps, the defense is ahead of the offense. But I think you put that into proper perspective. You have a rookie quarterback who's still kind of learning the ropes and just kind of finding his way right now, and they're trying a lot of different things. So I think that off that day, with everything that went on in terms of just being in a stadium, in front of fans, and in game-like situations, there were a lot of new things that were thrown at Zach Wilson so that he's experienced a little bit once the games start, on over the weekend against the Giants and so on. So, yeah, I mean, it was kind of what we've seen, and maybe a little bit worse on Saturday, this past Saturday night at the scrimmage. He's up and down. It's a roller coaster right now, and I think that's what you're seeing right now from this quarterback and the rest of the offense because of that.
I think that the positive news for the Jets, Dennis, is that they just finished their install, I believe, yesterday. So they've been working through a lot of new reps. They've started to get the meat and bones down, but they're still adding, the salad and sides, so to speak. So we heard a lot last offseason about just how bad the Jets' starting offense was. And in that green and white scrimmage, the second team absolutely annihilated the Jets on both sides of the ball that night. Would you say it's still night and day in comparison to what we're seeing from Robert Saleh's squad and what we saw from Gase's team last offseason?
Well, I mean, they wouldn't take much, right? I mean, you guys suffered through that season, as fans, just trying to find something positive to latch onto, and I think, I think you have a system that's going to work with this quarterback. I think they're going to work the system to the quarterback. I think they've surrounded him with guys. I mean, Elijah Morris stood out. Corey Davis has stood out. And the running backs have taken their turns, sometimes on the same day, just like showing different looks. One guy can, catches it out of the backfield and takes off. Another guy runs it out of the back. Like there are weapons around him, and I think that's key. I think you'll be able to see some movement, and you might see some points also this year. So we'll see. It all starts with the quarterback and the system, but you could flush all that other stuff from last year and the year before out for now, because this is a new system, a new staff, a new quarterback, a new offense, So I would say yes, though. It is night and day, because there's a positive vibe, and that's with the offense and around the whole team too.
Clay, what's bad for the offense means it's pretty good for the defense, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect from the defense this year. Obviously, we knew the defensive front was pretty strong. We have a lot of bodies that they can kind of just rotate with. And we don't even have Quinn Williams practicing right now. So it's great to see that they're dominating without their best player. Well, actually, Carl Lawson might have something to say about that. But yeah, and then you see C.J. Mosley. He's coming back after pretty much 2 years off. And he's leaner, moving around really well, which he's going to have to do in this defense. they don't really bring pressure on passing down. So he's going to have to move around quite a bit. So I think that's why he kind of slimmed down a little bit. Apparently he's looking really good. Granted, you always got to take it with a grain of salt during this time of year. But the early returns on how he looks is very promising. And then the back end is what's going to be the biggest issue. And if they're holding up pretty well against, I would say, a solid group of receivers, you got to like it. I mean, I think Salah's really going to coach these guys up. Obviously, we know how smart of a guy he is, and what he's going to do with this secondary is going to be very interesting.
Guys, for those of you who aren't following Dennis on Twitter, every single session after camp, he'll have a great emoji report card. And Dennis, I wanted to ask you, the easiest thing for you each and every single day right now must be putting a little fire emoji next to Carl Lawson's name, because it seems like every day he's just dominating.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, so let me take you guys back. I've been doing this for a few years, and it started off, I think it started in free agency, man, probably like 2015 or 16, like 5 or 6 years ago. And, because it was something that I wanted to do as something different and just listing things, and then I started doing it in training camp, and it started to take off last year. And this year, like, people are really enjoying it. And I didn't know when I first started that it would be something that people would like, because it's kind of cheesy and corny, and it's not something like, right. Like, I like this. But anyway, yeah, like this year in particular, I mean, Carl Lawson, like just every day, and Elijah Moore too. He wasn't on today's, but he made a couple of plays. It's just like, today Carl Lawson had like at least 3 sacks, and he just keeps popping off the page, off the field. And and like this thing is fun to do, to have the scorecard. But Carl Lawson is a frequent emoji item, line on there. And, like I said, Elijah Moore, and obviously the Zach Wilson update every day and that kind of thing. But man, that defensive front, like you were talking about, I mean, if they can stay healthy and they can do what we think they'll be able to do, man, they could be really, really good, because like you said, you got Quinnen, Carl Lawson, and Foley up there, and Sheldon Rankins. Like, these are guys with experience, guys who have been there, guys that fit and complement each other. And I like what Jeff Ulbrich said a few weeks ago, I think. Maybe it was a mini camp, and he was talking about that front, and he said, where is the quarterback going to step up? If they keep closing that pocket, and that's going to be key, especially if there's still this thought that maybe the secondary is a little bit of a weakness. Like, those guys will help with the guys on the back end. And I think like Jeff fans should be excited about that, because right now they look good even without Quinnen. You put him in there, and now all of a sudden you've got this rotation of guys that can really affect the quarterback and stop the run and do all kinds of things up front. This is probably the best defensive line as a whole that you've seen on the Jets for, it's been a long time, for sure.
I wanted to transition now to today's practice, Dennis, get some up-to-date news, and why not start with probably the least fun topic to talk about right now on Jets Twitter and on social media, and that's Denzel Mims. This is my take on Denzel Mims, and you can correct me if you think I'm out of line here. I think Mims has really struggled mentally with the playbook. I know there was a rep today where he was in the wrong position and then made the catch after that. But I feel like there's a bit of a misconception that Denzel Mims isn't getting open, and that's why he's not getting reps. In the green and white scrimmage, didn't see the field a lot until the last 5 or 10 minutes, made a nice catch, was open on the touchdown to Josh Malone in the corner of the end zone, was open a few times yesterday, and you said his stock was on the rise today. A couple of questions. First off, how did Denzel look today? Give us the update. But then secondly, do you think I'm kind of correct in my line of thinking and what the Jet staff's trying to do with Denzel Mims right now?
Yeah, well, I think today he showed up a couple of times, and that's the thing. You want him to show that he could be a factor in this offense. And I think today he had a couple of nice catches, and that's what you want to see, because right now, so in my little emoji thing, the stock up, that's because it's been so low on him over the last few days, a couple of weeks, really. But I think, look, the guy is talented. The guy has athletic ability. They know that. I think he was drafted for a different type of offense. So what they're trying to do is find a role for him in this type of offense, and he's coming along. He has had reps. Today he was out there with the first team at least a couple of snaps I saw. So they are doing this rotation, but it's clear that there are guys ahead of him in the rotation. Robert Saleh, has talked about that as having guys, rotating and guys getting first team reps, second team reps, and third team reps and all that. But I think Denzel Mims, they're still trying to find a spot. And because he's so big and physical, man, that's a guy you would think that you would have him in red zone. Like you would find a way to use him down low, down near the goal line, have him in the end zone and be a threat, because he showed some signs last year. Last season he was able to go up and make some plays and use his size and his strength, and that's something that they won't just push aside. They want to try to incorporate him into the offense. So I think there's still a future for Denzel Mims. It's hard to just write off a second round pick who had some flashes last year and then had some ups and downs, but who didn't in that offense last year. So let's see. Let's see how it plays out. Let's see once the preseason games start. How they're using him there. And I think you'll get a better read on what Denzel Mims will be. But it would be hard for me to believe that they would just kind of toss the guy aside. Now, if Joe Douglas gets a call about him, well, you listen to that, and maybe you try to get something. The team that runs an offense that they think that he's an ideal fit for. Well, then you consider that. But by no means, I can't imagine he'll be a cut. No way.
No, I'm not cutting Denzel Mims for Jeff Smith, Vincent Smith, any of these guys. No, I know in the unofficial depth chart, which we'll get to later, who's listed as the backup outside receiver. So I doubt he gets cut. So when I see he's on the roster bubble, I think if there's any truth in it, which I don't know, but if there's any truth in it, it's like you said, it'd be through a trade where they're actually getting something in return for him, not just letting him loose.
Right, exactly. That's exactly how I think. And I don't think he's on the bubble. I think right now they're trying to find a spot for him, and that's the thing. They're working through the offense and they're trying to find a spot. So at the moment, he's not on the bubble. That could change down the line where somebody comes out. But like you said, Clay, I'm not cutting him for Vincent Smith, Jeff Smith, even though those guys have shown some speed and some ability. Mm-hmm. He was a second round pick for a reason, and I mean, if he doesn't fit in this offense, you can kind of find a role for him if you don't deal him, but I don't think it's going to come to
Clay,
that.
A guy we've talked about a little bit throughout the.
Say that again, Luke. I think we're having some difficulties. But here, actually, since I think we're trying to figure it out with Luke, actually, I want to move on to Hamza Nasruddin. So on your emoji report today, you mentioned that you got to keep an eye on him. What's been standing out about him? I know he was listed as a starter on this defense as I'm assuming weak side linebacker. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about him and what he's been doing in camp.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who has been really with the starters, and you see him making plays and just kind of flashing here and there, and he kind of, you almost overlook him a little bit when you're looking at that defense because you see the front, and you see Carl Lawson in the backfield, every other snap, and you see the back end, you're focused on who's playing corner, and at safety position you got Marcus May and LaMarcus Joyner. And then you look at the middle of the defense there, and you see Mosley and Jared Davis. But you also have, Hamza out there running, and he's athletic. He's big. He's a converted safety, as you guys know, and that's what they love. Robert Saleh, Jeff Ulbrich, they love those type of players, and that's why, they took him in the draft, and I think he's proving already that he's going to be a guy as a rookie who's going to have a significant role. So out of this draft class, you're going to see quite a few of those guys have some big roles, and he's one of them for sure.
Actually, let's just stick with that point. There's a lot of young guys, and particularly in the secondary. And on the unofficial depth chart, one of the biggest surprises to me was seeing that Brandon Echols was cornerback 2, or backup, not the second starter, in front of both Isaiah Dunn, who's been getting a lot of love as an undrafted free agent, and Jason Pinnock. I hope that's how you say his last name. The fifth-round rookie out of Pittsburgh. So was that a shock to you at all? Because I feel like Echols has kind of been like he hasn't been talked about all so much.
Well, I'll tell you guys this. The depth chart at this point is very unofficial. It's not a coach's depth chart. It's just kind of like a general team depth chart. So you can only really take it with a grain of salt. So I wouldn't put too much stock into that. But I think he's shown some things, Brandon Echols. And he's been up and down also. He's had a couple of good practices where he's been covering guys, and then he's gotten beat, which you would expect, as a guy coming in, as a rookie and playing that position and going up against NFL wide receivers now, So, but this is good. This is the good stuff, the good part of training camp, where you have all these young guys, these rookies, and you're just, as Robert Saleh is just like mixing and rotating all these guys, getting them, a feel for playing up against the starting offense, and vice versa, so that they get this feel. So leading up into preseason, and that secondary is young, and inexperienced, especially at the cornerback spot. So you got to see what these guys have. And I think right now, if you go into it, Bless Austin and Bryce Hall are the starters, but then you need some guys who can come in. And I think, Jason Pinnock and Brandon Echols are two of those guys who will have roles in some way on this team this year, and be even as the backups at those, at the cornerback spot for sure.
All right, I think we have Luke back. All right, yeah, Luke, take it if you want to.
Can you guys hear me? I don't know what's happening. I'm at work. It's all happening. What's happening with the right tackle spot, Dennis? That's something I'm super intrigued by because, George Fant missed the first part of camp due to the COVID-19. They listed them both as first teamers on the depth chart. Where's your head at right now? Do you think one or the other has the edge, or this is just an open competition right now?
Man, that's a good question because they keep saying that. Right, we keep hearing the right tackle spot is an open competition between George Fant and Morgan Moses, but it's hard for me to imagine Morgan Moses not starting, coming here and not being the starter, because, it makes so much sense. The experience, he's been good. He's been very good for a long time, and I think it's probably something out of respect to George Fant also, going into this first, depth chart, like listing them kind of together. And I think that they've both rotated. I think, at the green and white, they both worked with the starting team, and George Fant, coming off of COVID also. So he's, kind of working there, but he's full now. He's ready to go. But it would be hard for me to think and to imagine Morgan Moses not being the starter week one. Because you could do other things with George Fant also, and he's such a valuable, just a backup to have, and a guy who could fill in here and there. Or, I think it'll be Moses, and I think they want to see two veterans go up against each other, and maybe George Fant will surprise us. I think he has there's a ceiling with George Fant that he's still trying to get to. We know what Morgan Moses is. So they're trying to see, because they know that there's some ability there that George Fant is still trying to reach, and progress as somebody who's still, I wouldn't say learning the position, but he's still developing, and while Morgan Moses is kind of a finished product, So I like the cool thing is that, these guys are very cordial with each other. Like they're very cool with each other. I've seen competitions over the years where, it's not so cordial. I think there's a mutual respect between both of these guys. And remember, George Fant was a team captain last year too. And, and he was very instrumental in helping the team stay together and come together even during, all of the racial, situations that like trying to put together programs and have them all together. George Fant was heavily involved in that. So I think, like I said, there's a respect there. So they don't want to just like kick him to the side and let Morgan Moses like full. I think they'll try to let it play out, but I think in the end it'll be Morgan Moses.
From a really exciting position to one that's not so much, Dennis, is the kicking spot. And it sounds like they had an excellent day at practice today. But not only that, it sounds like Amendola, who's the new leg brought in from Oregon State, sounds like he's had a really nice couple of training camp practices and was pretty good at the green and white scrimmage too.
Yeah, the first practice I think he was in, maybe even the second one also, he missed a couple he was wide left on the last one or two from that distance, whatever it was, 55 or 53. He has a strong leg. He's got a booming leg, but he's been more consistent lately. And both guys were perfect on their kicks today. And I think it's really shaping up into an intriguing competition. I think Ficken, I was surprised that Ficken was gone so early in camp because they liked him a lot. I mean, obviously it was a different coaching staff last year, but he there was something about him. They liked his ability. Brant Boyer, who's still there, he talked him up, and his ability to, after getting hurt, coming back and like fighting through some things. He had a groin issue, and so he wasn't fully healthy for a lot of last year, and like kind of fought his way through that until he couldn't. And here you go again, and he had a really bad day at camp, and then he was gone. And then they brought in Amendola. So we'll see. I think this will play out. Now, it's funny because on Twitter I put something like, when they signed Amendola, that there's still a chance that the kicker for this team in week 1 is not on the roster yet. And people were like, oh, you got to give Amendola a shot. He's got a big leg. And like, that's true. But I'm saying I've seen this happen over the years too, when, you think your kicker's there and the guy's and then somebody shakes free with the cut downs. That happened several years ago. Like, I remember even at punting, when the Jets had a few punters in camp, and Steve Weatherford ended up shaking free, getting cut by whoever he was with at that time, the Jaguars or the Saints, I can't remember. And then the Jets signed him after it looked like, oh, the Jets are going with this guy from Ohio State, I think it was, who had a big leg. But those things happen, So it's possible that neither of these guys end up, or maybe one of them really just shows some real good consistency in the preseason. So I think that's what they're hoping. I think they like the fact that both guys are young and they have big legs. So we'll see. I like a kicking competition. I'll watch that.
Yeah. And actually, you brought up a good point, saying that you're not sure if the kicker's on the roster right now. Name that's been brought up, I'm gonna butcher the last name if I try it. The UDFA from Miami, Jose Borregales.
Oh.
I mean, obviously he's behind Ryan Suckup in Tampa, and he's been dominant for them. So I would expect him to get cut if he's not traded. We can't do a Corey Vedvik trade here, but yeah, that's a name I'm looking out for if they don't like Amendola or the other kid from SMU.
Right, exactly, and you see that at all different positions every year. Where there are guys that stand out or look promising, but then somebody becomes available, and that guy has more potential. And there's a lot of roster shuffling that goes on, and I could see that potentially happening at that particular position this year. When cut downs are made.
I actually Sorry, Luke. I feel like
No, go
I'd be
for it.
remiss if I didn't bring up and ask you about the player of this podcast, Michael Carter II. I am a big fan of his. Didn't really know who he was when we drafted him, but the second we drafted him, I started watching his film and I loved it. So I'm curious to know like how he's been doing in camp and if there's any chances that he's actually in that starting lineup. Because obviously, I'm sure he's vying for that starting slot position with Javelin Guidry.
Yeah, I think there is. He hasn't really like flashed that much, but he's getting a lot of work. I think Javelin Guidry has flashed though. He's had some really good practices over the last week or two, and well, I guess it's been 2 weeks. But yeah, he's looked pretty good. As far as Carter, I think he played that position. He played a lot of that in college. He's experienced in that role.
Yeah.
And he's got versatility too, because we were talking to him today, and he talked about how in college he played mostly slot, but could go to the outside and could also play safety in a pinch. And he's like a compact, physical type guy. You could see that.
Yeah.
And I just think, and this is not based on anything, but the way, maybe it is because of how Saleh was in San Francisco. I think they've just brought in a lot of athletes with versatility where we think there are starters, and there will be, but he's going to mix things up so much that he's going to try to confuse offenses, because he can have guys who are converted safeties into linebackers and guys who are corners who could also play safety and vice versa, and just do those things while also rotating the front and just keep those guys fresh, I just think, and I think that, maybe there's something to that with like a Marcus May in his situation where they have a plan where they know that they can bring some guys in or have some guys that are currently on the roster who could do that role, and they can mix and match where maybe they don't want to dedicate a lot of money in that position. There might be something to that because of the way Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich run that defense, where it's not such a, primary thing to have, a Marcus May. They like having him, but moving on, maybe they think that they can do some things back there in the secondary with guys where they won't have to pay as much at this time.
Last question from me, Dennis, and it's on Corey Davis. It sounds incredibly strange to say that a player who just got a $13 million per annum contract might be underrated, but it feels like so much of the buzz has been around Elijah Moore and the discussions around Denzel Mims as well. It sounds like Corey Davis has put together 3 or 4 really good practices the last week.
Yeah, I think he's shown who he is. He's a guy who's got a ton of experience, a guy who's made big catches in this league, a guy who can be a go-to guy. I think that the knock on him is people said, oh, well, is he really a number one wide receiver? Well, I think he could be a number one here in the role that he'll be in. And that's a guy who's a proven veteran who can run alongside Elijah Moore, who does different things than he does. And then you could bring in Crowder, and you have, there are weapons like we were saying earlier, and Corey Davis is a huge part of that. And I think, in a way that might help the Jets. Teams are going to scout and know, but if you kind of overlook Corey Davis, well, then you got Elijah Moore doing his thing and going downfield. And I just love having that 1-2 combo. And I do think those guys will be starters together, because it would be hard to imagine Elijah Moore not being on the field, especially with what he's done. And something that I wrote today about Zach Wilson, it also does apply to Elijah Moore and all the rookies, that, there's overreaction. What we're seeing in training camp, where Zach Wilson struggles and it's like it's the end of the world, where Elijah Moore has been lights out and is, oh my God, this guy's going to be the next Jerry Rice or something, So you have to kind of like temper those, but you do like what you're seeing from Elijah Moore. That's very promising. And he'll be a really good complement to Corey Davis. And I like his size. I like his toughness, and I think he'll be something really valuable to Zach Wilson as he develops here. And it is funny, like you said, he is kind of overlooked because of what Elijah Moore has done. And all of a sudden, Corey Davis will make a ridiculous catch, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right, yeah, that's what this guy can do, and he's been doing. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you say like you kind of have to temper expectations because I always go back to, I believe it was the year Darrelle Revis was holding out and Kyle Wilson was in camp and he was having a very good camp, and we're hearing things like, oh, he's gonna replace Revis, and when Revis is back, he's gonna replace Cromartie, like he's gonna be the next guy. Obviously, that didn't happen. So ever since then, I was in high school when that happened, but ever since then, I'm like, okay, we gotta. I love being optimistic. I know this is the first time Jets fans can be optimistic in a while, but we got to temper expectations about particular players in training camp because practices are different than games. And so when you said that, like, you kind of have to temper with Elijah Moore because you never know. Like, he still has to play an NFL snap. So it's kind of always brings me back to, I think it was 2010 when we were just constantly hearing about Kyle Wilson and how good he was doing in camp.
and then after that, you heard about D. Milner. Yeah. And he was going to be the next. And yeah, I mean, any team is hard pressed to find the next Darrelle Revis. You know, he was that dominant. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of talk. I remember D. Milner saying, you know, hey, he told the Daily News, I think, like, hey, you know, we're going to be. I think I'm the best cornerback in the league. That's the mentality that I have to have. And it's funny because just the other day we spoke to Bless Austin, who said some similar things. He's a very confident guy, and you like to hear that from your cornerback. And Rex Ryan used to say that he wanted that confidence out of his corner. He wanted that confidence that nobody can beat you, you know, at back there. And, you know, Bless Austin has had a couple of moments. He's had some bad moments, you know, so we'll see what happens. He's only played 18 games, you know, so we'll see. He's very young still, and but he's got some experience. But yeah, man, it's cool for the Jets fans to have a positive vibe now. And that a lot of that has to do with the coach, obviously. Yeah. Coming off of the last couple of years that you suffered through, you know, so that's cool to have that vibe. And it's been 10 years since you've been in the playoffs. So it's like, all right, it's time for things to start looking up. And I think between Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, like, at least that vibe is looking up. Now you got to put it on the field, and, you know, it starts right now. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I only have one more thing, Dennis. So obviously this is the last show we're going to have since we're just a once-a-week show. This is the last show we're going to have before the first preseason game in over 2 years. What do you expect to see Saturday night against the Giants? Is Zach Wilson going to play a first quarter, first half? What about the rest of the team?
I would say he'll play at least the first quarter. He'll probably play into the second quarter, because I think they really want to get him ready. You know, they really want him to – they want to see what he can do against other guys, you know, and not when he has Carl Lawson coming at him, you know, like somebody else, you know, and just playing against a different defense and getting a feel for that. So I could see him playing, you know, midway through the second quarter because, I mean, I don't think Josh Johnson will play. I think that's kind of clear. I think Mike White and James Morgan might play the second half, but I mean, maybe it's asking too much to have Zach Wilson play the first half, but I would not be shocked if he played the first half, depending on how long the drives go and that kind of thing. So I think you'll see a few possessions. You'll see a few drives with Zach Wilson, and it'll be good, you know, and playing the Giants. So, you know, he'll get some good experience from that, and that's what they need him to do. So that's what I would say, that like he'll play at least halfway into the second quarter, if not the whole first half.
I think everyone on Jets Twitter wants to see Zach Wilson have a Christian Hackenberg performance against the Giants in preseason. That's what we're all hoping for, surely. Dennis, really appreciate you coming on and giving us your time. I know you're a busy man. It's Dennis Waszak from the Associated Press, covers the New York Jets. Dennis, what have you got coming up in the pipeline? What's on the radar for you?
I've got a few features on some undrafted rookie. One's on an undrafted rookie, another's on a guy kind of down on the depth chart. Some interesting stories. Those will be later in the week. I always like finding those kind of stories, because we all write about Zach Wilson. I wrote about Zach Wilson today, and some of the guys, but training camp's a cool time for the writers and also for the fans too, that you find some of these stories that, you don't know about a guy, and it's like, here's a guy you could root for. Here's a guy who's had this kind of stuff, these kind of circumstances that he's had to work through and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's got some of that working on, that I'm working on, and I'm just happy that we're gonna have a game too to cover and to watch and to see how some of these things actually look in a game situation. So that'll be fun too. It's it's training camp and it's a grind and it's cool when the game starts. So I'm ready for that.
Well, we appreciate your time. I'm looking forward to you doing a emoji report card for the Jets beat after the season. That's what I really want to see. So, Dennis, thanks for joining us. From myself and Clay, plus our producer, thank you for watching again. Play Like a Jet Live, brought to you by U Stadium. We'll see you next week after the first preseason game, Wednesday night at 7:15 p.m.